Development was, of course, an issue in these remarks. It always is an area of focus. And specifically, I want to talk about the commitment of 57,000 new homes being built by 2031. That was a commitment that was made. And also, it was pointed out that rental affordability is coming back into alignment. In fact, sometimes when you're renting, you might even get a free month's rent. And I wonder what you think that this area of the speech, how it impacted the overall theme, and also whether you think that a city council can really have a lot of influence over something like rent levels in a city this size. And Steve, let's just stick with you.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. I think that the fact that we have more rental supply and housing supply, I think, has been one of the biggest changes in overall rates. So, to the effect that the city was able to help advance developers' plans and incentivize some of the building that's going on and have land ready and so on, all of that. Yeah, some kudos to them and to the mayor for doing that. I think the decreases in rent and in housing costs are not just a London story, though. Like that's happening in communities all across Canada, in fact. So maybe every mayor is doing all the good work that our mayor is doing too. I don't know, but I think that there's good news on that front. However, housing is such a complex issue, and I think given my 40-year career, I can't think that we can talk about housing without talking about homelessness and the numbers of people we covered on that earlier in the podcast who are struggling to maintain housing that they have, and small little changes that can push people out of the market, as well as so vulnerably housed people, precariously housed people, as well as the growing levels of homelessness due to there not being a stable amount of affordable housing in the city. So I think that on that front, I can't give council a pass on that front, but recognize the efforts on their part, but can't give them a pass on that part because it's a lot of talk and just not enough action on that front.
Okay, Carol?
Yeah, so I mean, it's great. There's lots of construction. We can see that there's lots of construction going on, and there is the decrease in rental costs. I will say, I believe part of that, I can't be sure, is because of the federal government's reduction in international students. I think that really reduced the pressure in some areas. And so particularly in London, where we've got Fanshawe College and we've got Western, part of that might be attributed to a decrease in student enrollment. But yeah, like Steve said, I mean, you want to also see those tangible differences. And I know actually quite a few people, I mean, quite a few, let's say four, it's still a lot. Four people who are employed, working every single day, and they are homeless. They are currently couch surfing, moving from place to place. And that's unacceptable to be working every single day. You're taking care of your children. In some cases, they have to be separated from their children because of this situation. And that's really not the way it should be within our society. And so we need to be doing a lot more to address those issues. Now, I will say I did appreciate that he mentioned about the money that's been put towards people getting to do modular homes in their backyards in different areas. That's fantastic. I actually know some people who have taken advantage of that. It is huge for people who have elderly parents that they're not sure what they're going to do with them because they can't live on their own. And yet, there is not a lot of places in long-term care. It's also very important for those families that have children with special needs that are now adults, but they also can't live on their own. So I think that's fantastic, and there needs to be a lot more investment, like grants in those areas, because it makes a huge difference, and it's also infill in the city. And now some of the people that I know that have taken advantage of that currently have children that are special needs. If later they no longer need that spot for that particular use, they can use it to rent out for, other students or, for families that need that home. So I really think that's a great direction to go, and I'm very glad to hear about that. But one of the things, he did mention, kind of tangentially how this was related to like the infill and the environment. I do think that there's a lot more work that London can do with that to make the communities, if you're building housing, make them more connected. Because especially with the affordability crisis, you need to make sure that there are ways that people can get to their homes, to their jobs cheaply. And that means having access to public transportation or having access to bike routes or being able to walk safely. There has to be those viable options. And right now, quite a few of the new developments are so disconnected from any kind of grocery store or community hub that adds an additional cost for people. So, great that they're building lots of houses, but I think there needs to be more consideration for connectedness and more work on the infill.
Okay, thanks for that. I think a number that I'm familiar with is, if you as a family can not have a car, or if you can get away with not having a second car, each vehicle is at the time was about 10 to $12,000 per year on your household bottom line, and I'm sure it's more than that. And that's just maybe a tangible figure that backs up some of the points that you were making. How about you, Paul?
Well, I felt like this part of the speech fell flat, frankly. I mean, I deal with people who are looking for jobs every day. They're struggling, staff that are, not making big bucks, and they're struggling. Even my own kids, like I don't know, Dad, like so. Yeah, it's come down $50 or $100 a month. That's not in the realm of affordability, and so, you know. I felt it just didn't resonate with me very much at all. I think all of the things, there's no silver bullet here, but the ARUs, the backyard things, the increasing housing units, that's all good. But when we talk about the average cost of a house, being around the 600,000, I kind of go, oh my goodness, like that's, like holy cow, that's huge. And how does a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old, where do they, here again, identity, how do they see themselves in the city? Where do they see their place in the city? Um, so all of those things are good, and I think it's great that they're trying. I mean, obviously downtown, the initiatives of converting office space to housing is a good thing. Um, there's some criticism about who's benefiting from that incentives has been out there. Um, but we're not affordable. We're still not affordable. We're still excluding people. We're still marginalizing people, and from opportunities. And I think, Carol mentioned it. And, Matt, you and I have the scars from it. Rapid transit was not even mentioned. And there still is not a rapid transit across Oxford Street from Richmond, and yet Oxford and Wonderland is a transit hub. There are thousands of new apartments going to be built at Oxford and Wonderland and at Oxford and Beaverbrook. I haven't forgotten my urban geography. And so those are, and the development applications are predicated on there not being parking for cars. So there has to be a functioning rapid transit. I am amazed at the number of my staff that don't drive. They have to be able to get to work in a reasonable amount of time at a reasonable cost on public transit.
Mojdeh, how about you?
Thanks. Without having to repeat many of the great points already mentioned, on development and infrastructure, the mayor in this speech pointed to numbers to say London is building and that alone deserves recognition. The speech framed growth as momentum and confidence, and that's important politically for him and in an election year. he wanted to signal that London is open for investment and that projects are moving and that the city isn't paralyzed by process. And I think that he did that in a good way. If that was what his clear intention was, that's what I gathered from what he was trying to get across. Where the analysis needs more depth is connecting growth to what was already mentioned by other panelists, to equity. Housing is treated as a supply challenge rather, and how much we build or how fast and where we build. But volume alone doesn't tell us who is actually benefiting. The wait list for subsidized housing continues to grow. There has been no announcements around social housing investments. That is a distinct responsibility of the city. And deeply affordable units remain in really short supply, and dangerously short supply, as we know. Infrastructure and development, I think it needs to be said loud and clear, are not neutral. They shape who gets to stay in the city and who gets pushed to the margins. So the speech, though rightfully in a way celebrates what's being built, it doesn't fully address who is still being left out. And the mayor alone is not the only one that's doing this. The approach, time and time again, as we talk about, particularly development as it relates to housing, this is a repetitive pattern. Politically, the mayor is right to highlight growth, but if we want to have a more honest and clear and justice-oriented lens on the city and want to bring everyone along, the trajectory of the success in these numbers, this particular depth will ask us to measure success not just by cranes in the skyline, but by whether people can actually afford to live here. And so oftentimes when I'm asked, sometimes I apologize about seemingly not being a great ambassador for the city by saying, do not come to London if you're looking for an affordable place to live. It is no longer that. It used to be closer to that narrative where I could say to, 30-something-year-old couples starting a family that London can be safe and affordable and have things within relative reach. I think we've shifted quite a bit since those times, even though we had our own distinct challenges then too. So I think where we are right now in these economic times, we can't fall short in only highlighting growth and not measuring how well we're doing as a city by who can afford to stay and live here with dignity.